Hello and welcome to this very summarized and concise presentation of the ePerspectives Digital Enterprise Method and Framework. It is recommended very much that you also look at the more elaborate and longer versions on eatransform.com. Many concepts that we will be talking about, they will be much more elaborately described, so therefore in here we will make them very brief. We started looking at the paradigm shift when we moved from analog circuits to digital circuits in the world of electronics. While one of them gave us a lot of problems, making it not possible for us to apply change far from easily due to poor degree of coupling, too much coupling and low cohesion. It's not sequential, etc. We move to digital circuits where we have sequentiality, we have traceability, we have modularization, encapsulation, and componentization. Therefore, we can replace one of the components that you see here. We can simply take it out because it has clear interfaces, and we have a diagram. We can clearly take it out and replace it with a better component with better functionality. The rest of the circuit will carry on seamlessly, but with the better functionality. Now, this is great agility that we want to replicate in the world of business. So similarly, in the world of business, when we look at it, we have the same issues: too many organizations, too many units, too many connections, too many languages, mindsets, ways, or too many documents. That becomes very difficult to make it flexible and agile for changes. Therefore, using a framework such as ePerspective, we want to create a digital circuit of an enterprise which follows the same characteristics of being componentized, traceable, modularized, sequential, with low degree of coupling and high degree of cohesion. This is important for us because we need to look at different perspectives. They all have different mindsets, methods, techniques, and ways of looking at the world. And it's not enough that one of them achieves its targets optimally if, in fact, for example, it would be contradictory to that of the others. Therefore, we need one harmonized enterprise, and therefore we need to find one common way to bring all the different perspectives under the same umbrella. So we look at a one-pager for the ePerspective Digital Enterprise Framework. In this, we can, like an electronic circuit, we should be able to find any area of discussion in our business enterprise organization, and we should be able to locate it here. We should be able to look at what other parts are dependent on it, and be able to remedy whatever we need to do. So how does it work? We look at three key perspectives of business: enterprise, and change. Business is implementation agnostic because we want some of the constraints that we have today might not be there tomorrow. Enterprise perspective makes sure that we implement the business now optimally with what we have, and the two of them provide for us the baseline for the business and enterprise to do what it was initially intended to do. And from then on, any new idea, anything else that we want to do is deemed as change. We see change as baseline plus delta. So in this case, we will have to look at the change, dissect it, and see what part of it is a gap in business, what part of it is a gap with regards to the enterprise baseline, identify it, and make it available to apply and implement the change. So what goes on in every perspective? In business perspective, we first look at business strategy, which is what we want to be to the world and how we want to be perceived to the world as a business. So what's our interactions with the outside world that defines for us what we want to be. In business design, we look at how we want to do that. So we look at defining a business operating model that best satisfies what the business strategy defines for us to do. While, as mentioned, business perspective is implementation agnostic, we then go to the enterprise perspective to make that optimally implemented. So we need to look at technology, IT, but also look at organization, location, people, resources, material, everything else that we need to put in place in order to implement what the business needs to do, but we need to do that optimally. Then we look at the change perspective. Importantly, we break it into change planning and change rationalization. This is to ensure that we don't rush through implementation in the classic quick and dirty way, but we have a solid foundation to do implementation in a very coordinated and optimized manner. Now, looking at the business strategy, we see a number of activities we do. But before we look into that, it is important to highlight a key characteristic in the ePerspective method and framework. That is separation of what is internal, what is external. So anything that is internal to a perspective or a sub-perspective will be regarded only relevant to them. Right? So all this science and knowledge does not need to be propagated across the enterprise. In simple terms, we don't need to have meetings where strategy people are sitting with program people, with enterprise architecture, for example, people, and telling them impressive things about their methods and how they did that. It is really built on the notion of encapsulation. So if you look at the black box concept of a vending machine, this is what we try to replicate. So when I go to a vending machine, all I'm interested in is the interface. How do I invoke it? How do I insert the coin? Which product I choose from an interface point of view, and product that I will receive. I'm not interested in what happens from a science and engineering inside the box. So this is the same. While it is relevant to people in its own perspective or sub-perspective, it's not relevant to the others. Only the output, which has been distilled and made understandable, readable for them, made consumable for them, that is relevant. So for a moment, let's look at what happens. But again, this is what I tell. The summary that we talk about is only relevant to business strategy people, and they know it much better than me. So normally what do? We start from a vision, we contextualize it with a context diagram or a business canvas modeling exercise. Then we do strategic analysis. We use methods such as Lean or Six Sigma, Enterprise Strategic Analysis and Transformation, ESAT, etc., etc. And this analysis will also help us identify our high-level services and strategic capabilities that we need in order to interact with the outside world. And importantly, as you see in this picture, the fourth bitmap, the small bitmap, bottom right, is an X matrix, and this is important, but we make strategic capabilities measurable from now on. So we map the strategic capability through the X matrix to KPIs, but also indirectly to strategic objectives and values. All this will be encapsulated and called strategy formulation, and this will go to what we call a strategic capability model, which is high-level strategic capabilities, but made measurable through link to business strategy. This is really important because this will go downstream from now on, and it's important that every key component that we look at in future will have a business value. Also, I would like to mention that many consulting firms come here and do strategy work, and this becomes shelfware because it's in a different world of abstraction, and only they understand it, and it's never distilled normally, and so it will never go downstream, and people cannot do work with it. So it becomes a very expensive piece of work, which is not as usable as we envisaged. So going back to here, we have baseline, a strategic capability model. The rest doesn't concern anybody except people who work in the business strategy world. Next is, as I mentioned, the business design, when we define the business operating model. Now, in this case, we do, again, methods and techniques such as business process modeling, customer journey modeling, customer experience, structure modeling, org modeling, and such. But again, all that science will be captured, distilled, and as input, it will go to what is a business capability model. So the business capability model starts as default with a strategic capability model, but then it evolves as we do more process analysis and structural analysis. This becomes a more elaborate and detailed version of the strategic capability model. So this is a business capability model that is highly important because in here we can also exercise heat mapping and start looking at what capabilities in our organization are deemed more critical or more relevant or competitive edge and such. And as you see from now on, the entire business perspective becomes sort of irrelevant to everybody else except this very work product, which is called business capability model. So as you see, there's a connection downwards that goes to enterprise planning and operation that will have to take everything into account, how we do things, processes and organization and such, so that will become input to planning and operation for the enterprise. But importantly, it also goes into the enterprise perspective. It is made available to the enterprise perspective. So that is literally the only connection between enterprise perspective and business perspective. So therefore, anything else that you find on business perspective is oblivious, is not of relevance to the enterprise perspective. This simplifies our life a lot. So in this case, what we look at is how, for the enterprise perspective we're looking at now, we first said how we define and design the business agnostic to implementation. This is what we did in business perspective. Now we want to implement that business, but optimally. And this is where we look at our IT and technology, org and resourcing, and people and material that need to be in place, right? And all of this again gets encapsulated, right? We have also a link to the business world, so we can look at business value, and we have a link to the change world, as I will explain. So in this case, we start from a point of view of business capability model, which had by now the knowledge of business operations, customer journey, as well as the business value encapsulated already in it. Now, as mentioned, it is implementation agnostic and business only. Now we come here and we look at every capability and say, how do we profile you from an enterprise technology point of view and from an organization resourcing point of view? This gives us also a 4+1 or 360 assessment and analysis possibilities. How does that work? We look at every capability. In this case, we take one example such as payment. We look at every capability and profile it. So, okay, what are the applications, data in scope for payment, and what is the infrastructure underlying OS and technology that we're using for it? But also more, we can profile it more with like these applications. Who is the vendor? What's our relationship with the vendor? How long is our commitment for the given application to the vendor? And very detailed key insight that we need for decision making. We also look at organizations aspect. So like for every capability, we look at what people do we have, what locations, are they IT, are they internal, are they external, and we profile them for the given capability. But also, given the given capability already has an established link to the business perspective in terms of the access to BCM, so we will be able to look at payment services and derive a KPI value for them. What is the value of them to business if we're going to change them? Last is the change portfolio link. So we need to know what are the current or future initiatives or projects that are touching upon payment, in which case we need to take that into account when we look at the payment capability and we want to do things with it. So this is what we do here at exercise. It's called heat mapping. We look at every capability. Are you important to us? We do the full degree assessment, and this gives us the possibility to do what if scenario analysis and make fact-based decisions, not emotional based, not based on product features, not based on apparent cost of an application, but its true digital value. What is its org value? What is its business value, technology and change value, based on which decision makers can make qualified, substantiated decisions. Now, this heat map version of enterprise capability model will lay the foundation for what we call a change capability model, which is a subset of everything that we need to change, all the capabilities that we need to do, apply some changes to. In here, the science of it, we apply capability-driven solutioning and capability-driven planning. This is really important that everything is done capability-driven to avoid mutual integrity issues. So anybody, the teams that work on a work packet will be working on a capability, on the payment, right? So then if there's if they need something of credit management, some services, they don't go and define it themselves, but they request for the credit component to provide them those services. This is highly relevant and important as we go to implementation and planning, because it gives us the ability to avoid mutual integrity issues, which are normally very much everyday scenario in when we do program management, project management, if we have work packets that are just regarded as chunks of work and they don't maintain the mutual integrity. Later, this becomes again encapsulated all the science. So the change capability model will be enriched with the change approach, solutioning, and the planning. And then we will go and implement it, which is we look at the change realization in terms of adding something new or keeping as well as improving. That means keep and improve at the same time, which normally means we apply a multimodal approach in implementation. This is a one central document, in this case captured in an Excel, but it is recommended to capture it in tools such as Software AG's Alphabet. In one central document, we have everything. The golden thread, which is XCM, strategic, business, enterprise, and change capability models. XCM. So one central artifact, one central document for cross-enterprise roles. This is all we need to use. Through this, we can have access to anything we need that is relevant, but we can provide authorization in this to relevant people so that not everybody is able to view and or edit parts that are there they shouldn't. So this is one of the greatest advantages of the ePerspectives method and framework, that instead of tons and hundreds of documents and artifacts and science, we only use one central document, and this is the single version of truth. All the key insight and enterprise insight will be behind this. Everywhere else, it is duplicated with a mutual integrity mechanism. So if I'm somewhere else and I'm using this data, I call it by reference, but if I have to duplicate it and do some changes with it, we invoke a mutual integrity, mutual locking at that time, so that once my data is updated, it will be back to this central repository. So this central repository is always a single version of truth with the most recent updated insight and data. In this, we can show how the method one-pager relates to this. It again captured in Excel for facilitation. So you see SCM, and on the left bottom side you see the light blue columns, and in the second one we see strategic capabilities, and in the left one we see through the X matrix the business value of a given strategic capability. Then we come to the BCM, and in here we see the business processes that will now give us the business capabilities. As we do more analysis, we get business capabilities, and the capability consumer and capability provider will help us with the interactions. And in this case, we have the customer journey map and the organization profiling mapped in the BCM. And then moving on through the golden thread again to the enterprise capability model, we now have enterprise capabilities and then enterprise services, which correspond to the business services. And we're looking at the application data, technology, and organ resourcing, as you see up there, the two top right and bottom left sub perspectives. And as you see also, we have top left, we have access to the blue side, blue perspective, and bottom right, we have access to the green perspective. So now we come to the change perspective. We have the CCM, which only takes the subset of the ECM to apply changes to. And from this, as we go capability driven, we will have program to stream project, as well as work packet, as well as even tasks and lots, which are all capability driven. The method and framework has been highly successfully leveraged in very innovative and pioneering digital transformation initiatives, very strategic at very top level clients, global leading brands. It always, to my experience, it makes the business people, IT people who are involved with it, both sides, enthused and energized, because as they will get to learn the method and framework, it is spoken as much as possible in human language, in business normal language, and it eliminates all the needs for so many interactions and so much science, and only makes relevant what is just needed. And it has received excellent reviews as a result of all the great initiatives and transformation engagements that it has been used in and provided great results. I'm Arsalan Rad. I would like to thank you for your time. Until the next one. Cheers.